The diversity that maybe you didn't even know about. So within the suborder Serpentines, you got two main divisions. You have your infraorder, the Elapidae, and Ophidia just means snake. And the Elapidae have the majority of the diversity. There are 15 families with 316 genera within those families. And these are what we refer to as the advanced snakes. And whenever you're picturing a snake, you can almost guarantee the features you're thinking of are of these more advanced types. Like your, this would be a Chicago garter snake would be a good representative. That's what I catching. And then the other half would be your infraorder Elapidae. And they're a little bit less, a lot less diverse. There are only 3 families and 15 genera. And we call these the blind snakes, and they're considered to be quite a bit more primitive. They're almost all fossorial, which means they're burrowing in the ground. And they've got a lot of adaptations for that. You can see most of them just have like an eye spot as opposed to an actual eye. So they're almost completely blind. Maybe they can sense light and dark. They have these very tubular body plan. There's not a lot of definition between the head and the neck and the body. That's all adaptations for digging around. And they also do not have jaws that are as specialized for engulfing large prey items like other species. They primarily eat soft-bodied prey, like termite and ant larvae and things like that. And if I'm going too fast at any point, just tell me to slow down, or if you have a question. This lecture probably won't take a full hour, so I've got time for questions. So this is sort of a generalized tree. It's not exactly the most up-to-date because snake phylogenies are always being changed. So here's your Serpentes, your 2 branches, the Elapidae and the Skeletal. And so we've only got a few there. And yeah, this is just one species off as a side group. We call that the pipe snake. We're not really going to talk about them today. We aren't really going to talk about these guys. So these guys we're going to focus on these macrostomata snakes, which are your pythons and your boas and your other modern species. And this is where really like 90% of the species of snakes that are extant live or belong. So snakes live pretty much everywhere in the world except Antarctica. Anywhere that's warm enough for reptiles, you find snakes that are found further north, I think, than any other reptiles. Yeah, way up in Canada, they're able to withstand a wide range of climates because they don't really have to eat very often. They can stay dormant for long periods of time. And then, of course, you also have sea snakes, a lot of them which are completely pelagic, meaning that they live out in the open water. They don't actually ever need to go to land. And having almost all the warm water, and except for the Atlantic. And what's really interesting is you see how this sort of range cuts out just south of California. Because of the El Nino this year, you've actually been getting a lot of these yellow-bellied sea snakes washing up on the shore in California because they're moving up with the warmer water, which I just find pretty neat because they hadn't seen any in like 100 years, and then this year they got like 10. So like I said, snakes can be found in really diverse environments, from incredibly dry interior deserts of Australia, the middle of the Pacific Ocean. This guy is what you call a European adder, and that picture is taken most likely up in Scandinavia, and they're really only able to be active for a very short time of the year when it's warm and sunny, so they take whatever chance they can get, even if that means the rest of their surroundings are covered in snow. And this one's really cool. Not because it's super unique, but because this is the snake I'm going to be studying this summer up in the mountains in Honduras. It's called the palm pit viper. And so, got snakes everywhere from the jungle to the ocean to the cold forest and everywhere in between. And even though snakes don't have legs, they have a lot of diverse modes of locomotion. They can be really good climbers, swimmers, burrowers, slitherers. I don't know if that's a real word, but they're really good at it. And some of them are actually pretty fast. So a black mamba, which is this guy here, that can move up to 12 miles an hour. So that's like fast enough to catch up to you. Not that they use that speed to chase down prey, they actually use it to escape predators, but it's pretty amazing. That's actually that's one of the longest venomous snakes as well. And you can learn a lot about the habits of a snake just by looking at its body type. So a long, thin snake is generally a faster moving, more actively foraging predator.
So the longer it is?
It's not necessarily the longer, the thinner it is in relation to the length.
Yeah.
And that's because their vertebral segments are longer, and that gives them more ability to move more quickly. But that also sacrifices their ability to coil tightly. So a long, thin snake is generally an active forager moving around quickly, grabbing its prey and just swallowing it whole or envenomating it to kill it. Whereas a shorter, stouter snake is going to be moving more slowly, more likely to be a constrictor because they have the shorter vertebral segments, which allows them to coil up tighter around their prey. And so I guess the constrictors will have like a more round body shape. And then you can also have long, thin snakes which climb trees because it's distributing their weight over a larger area, so they can be on thinner twigs. And a lot of the snakes that climb trees have a more squarish body shape. The most extreme would be the sort of eye. Do you guys know what an eye beam is? When you see a big steel beam like in a skyscraper that's like shaped like this, like cross-sectionally, that's like an incredibly strong that's like an incredibly strong shape for sticking straight out with no support. And you actually have some vine snakes which have like a body shape that's almost like this. So if you see something that's square or almost immense like that, almost certainly lives in a tree. And if you see a snake that's really wide and fat, or has a wide girth in comparison to its length, it's more likely a sit, which is just waiting for its prey to walk by before it snatches it and eats it. So long and thin, active, less likely to be a constrictor. Short and fat, more likely an ambush predator sitting around. So serpentine motion is the most common mode of locomotion for snakes. And this is just your side-to-side lateral undulation, and that's also the fastest mode. One thing to say before I get into all of these is a species doesn't rely on only one mode of locomotion. They can do different kinds of the ones that I'm going to describe. But this is sort of the typical. Concertina, so this is where one part of the snake grips part of the surface or the log or the edge of the tunnel and pushes its forend forward and then pulls the rear up to it. As opposed to doing this, it's just like sort of scooching. Moves a bunch of coils, pushes its head forward, brings the coils up. And just, it's almost like a spring. You like pull it forward, the rest comes with, and then you pull it forward and the rest comes with. And that works well on branches. You can see like this snake is obviously not going to just be able to like wiggle straight up like that. It needs to have a grip. So it's going to grip, pull the rest of its body forward, and then move up again. It's a lot slower than the serpentine motion, but it works in different environments. Also works better on a slippery surface.
What was the other one?
The previous one?
Yeah.
Serpentine?
What kind of surface did you just say?
It works on branches, in tunnels, and on slippery surfaces. It also works on normal ground, it's just not as efficient. So rectilinear, this is kind of a neat way that snakes move. This is really only possible for the heavier bodied snakes, so that'd be your boas, your pythons, and your vipers. And what they're doing is, if you see a snake, you will sometimes see a snake that's like completely stretched out, and yet it's slowly creeping forward. And that's because the muscles are stretching and contracting in the ventral surface, and these ventral scutes, they're called, are sort of gripping the ground. So if this is the ground, this is the muscle. It's like doing this across the ground, but that muscle is like all the way down the entire belly of the snake. Right. And yes.
Did you call them muscular scutes?
Ventral scutes. And this is really good for sneaking up on your prey because it's just really slow and steady movement as opposed to, you know, the more thrashing around of the serpentine type movement. And this one's one of the coolest ones. If we have time in the end, I'll show you a video. This is sidewinding, and this is where a snake is essentially just like throwing coils forward and alternating, and that way it reduces contact with a really hot surface, and it also lets them move on a very loose soil or a loose substrate where the other types of movements might just sort of dig them into the ground. They might just, when they're pushing off, the sides of the scales, or if like say this is black spot is the point of contact where it's pushing. If that's on loose sand, it's just going to push into the sand. Whereas this is coming down on top.
So that's primarily going to be in desert snakes.
Yeah, so it's primarily in deserts in North America. We have the sidewinder. In the Middle East and Africa, you have the different horned vipers, and they all do this. But there are also some snakes in Southeast Asia which do this on mud flats, because the mud is also, you know, loose. And they can actually get going really fast. The thing is that if you have really any sort of obstacle in your way, this is not going to work, because like look at how much space that's taking up, because these tracks are horizontal as opposed to like vertical in the same direction that you're moving in. So you get a little clump of grass and it's really going to kill your mojo. So there are a ton of unique characteristics to a snake. Some of them are pretty obvious. The snake's body plan's, you know, long and thin, so it's going to have elongated organs. They also don't have a urinary bladder. I'm not entirely sure what the exact significance is of that. It's probably to save water. And in most species, only one of the lungs is functional, and usually that's the right lung. And so you got this little tiny left lung, and then the right lung is just filling this entire cavity. Yeah. Most species only have a right lung. And the size of the lung is often proportional to the habitat that it lives in. So if this is a snake that lives in an aquatic environment, it's going to have a larger lung so it can dive for longer. And they can also use that to adjust their buoyancy in the water, sort of like a swim bladder in fish. And they only have one because it just helps fit in the body better than two. So some of the features that really make it easy to identify a snake versus, say, a legless lizard would be this fused immobile scale over the eye, which we call the brill. So there are no snakes that have eyelids. They all just have one clear scale over the eye. So they can never close their eyes. And then they also don't have an external ear opening. And they've lost a lot of their hearing function. So the middle ear and the eustachian tubes are also not present. So they can feel vibrations that they pick up from the ground, but they're really not hearing the things that would be audible to us. And it's believed that these are kind of interesting features, and it was believed that maybe they evolved because the common ancestor to all snakes was perhaps fossorial. So having an ear opening when you're digging in the dirt is not very beneficial because it's really just going to get full, and hearing is maybe not as useful down there. And as well as the covering over the eye is very hard and protective.
You call it brill.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then of course, so that was sort of, those were the reasons why it originally was thought to have come from a fossorial ancestor, and that's why they think that the Scolopophidian snakes, those blind snakes, were maybe the most primitive group. But we're not going to get into that too much because there's a lot of debate, and the other ancestor that they think maybe is from has to do with this forked tongue and venom. So the tongue flicks in and out, has the two sides, and that helps them detect which direction a scent signal is coming from. The tongue moves back into the mouth and rubs up against the vomeral nasal organ, also called the Jacobson's organ. And that is a really strong chemoreceptor. So similar receptors, taste and smell in us, but much more developed.
Yeah, but the Gila much has forked tongue too.
Yeah. So the other belief or other line of thinking is that snakes evolved from monitor lizards. So that'd be your water monitors, your Komodo dragons, things like that, which entered the water, and actually during the Mesozoic, so the time of the dinosaurs, you had a lot of creatures called mosasaurs, which were basically monitor lizards without legs. And they believe that perhaps that is the common ancestor of snakes. But snakes don't leave very good fossils, so it's really difficult. And it's pretty hard to draw the line between what's a lizard and what's a snake in a lot of situations. So also similar to lizards, they have the paired copulatory organs, the hemipenes, so the bifurcated penis, which is inside the body, and then everts. And a really cool adaptation are these heat-sensitive pits, and those are found in pit vipers and boas and pythons, and they detect infrared radiation. So they basically have heat vision, which I think is really neat. So there are also some really cool skeletal adaptations and features. Obviously, we all know snakes don't have limbs, but they also don't have a pectoral girdle, none of them do. The pectoral girdle would be analogous to your collarbone and shoulder blades in humans, so that's where your front limbs would attach to. And some of the snakes still have a vestigial pelvic girdle, so that would be, you know, your pelvis and your hips and whatnot, where your hind limbs attach to. And the ones that still have vestiges of this would be your pythons, boas, and then some of the blind snakes, but it's incredibly reduced. In pythons, you can actually see what would be just the last remnants of a leg, so what you call spurs. They're not really attached to anything, they're just kind of there. They believe that they're still around for mating. They're only on the males, and I believe this is a ball python. No sternum. So the sternum is where all of your ribs attach in the center of your chest, and snakes do not have that. All their ribs are splayed the entire way down. And they of course have a ton of vertebrae, so anywhere between 150 to 400. And these vertebrae can be different shapes, as I was mentioning before, based on the lifestyle or evolutionary history of the snake. And these vertebrae are interlocking, and you call that zygap. I had to learn this word yesterday. Zygapophysis. And really the most interesting parts and the most highly derived part of the skeleton of the snake that sets them apart from other reptiles is this highly kinetic skull. So kinetic means motion, and there are a lot of parts of the skull that can bend and pivot in different ways. So there's 8 different points of articulation, and these are all there so that they can swallow larger prey. So all snakes are, one, they're all carnivores. There are no herbivorous snakes. And 2, they all swallow their food whole. They have no way of really tearing it up. Actually, sorry, there's one. There's a crab-eating snake that actually rips the legs off, which then it swallows whole. But none of them are chewed. And all of these, there are some other adaptations for that. So the quadrate, which is a bone in the jaw, is elongated, which gives them a bigger gape, allows them to swallow something larger. And then they have jaws where each section can move independently of each other, which allows them to pull the food into their mouth. And I'll show you. So here's your typical synapsid skull, like a lizard, and here's your snake skull in relation to that. And this is your quadrate. So this bone is obviously much, much larger than it would be on a similar sized lizard, and it's facing more outward, so it gives the snake some more diamond-shaped head. And really, all of these points where the bones connect in the jaw are articulated. So when someone says they're unhinging their jaw, that's not actually true, because if it was unhinged, it wouldn't work at all. But there are ligaments that allow a certain amount of separation between each of the pieces. And here's just sort of the snake eating. They characteristically eat from the head first, because the limbs, fall in line, as opposed to from the tail first, where the limbs don't bend, or would be facing the wrong way, and you get caught in the jaw of the snake. And sometimes they'll eat in different ways, but that's usually only on smaller prey. And here's just another view. So this would be the skull. This would be looking from the bottom of the top part of the skull. So you have these 4 rows of teeth, your palatine teeth and your maxillary teeth. And like I was saying earlier, these all can move independently. So when a snake is swallowing a large prey item, it's like walking each jaw of it and pulling it back. And once it gets to a certain point, the muscles in the esophagus actually pull it down and take it from there.
What was that third one? Underneath the high looking at the skull?
You were talking about one specifically where the proportional
There are different sizes based on the lifestyle. So like aquatic snakes have larger ones. So this is, I think, one of the really cool parts of snakes is they actually have very specialized dentition, whereas in a lizard, all the teeth are more or less the same. Snakes have some incredibly highly derived teeth for delivering venom. So this is your standard snake. All snakes have these recurved, really pointy, thin teeth, which they use to grasp prey, then hold on, and then also pull it into their esophagus. And this would be your sort of standard, your run-of-the-mill snake. And then you have a snake, so just because the teeth are long and thin and curved does not mean that they're fangs. Fangs are teeth that are hollow and adapted for delivering venom. So a snake which is regular teeth like this would be called aglyphus, as without fangs. So the next step up from that would be an epistoglyphus snake, and that's a snake that has what we would call a rear fang, and that's a tooth developed for injecting venom, but it's all the way in the rear of its mouth. Your more advanced venomous snakes don't have this. These would be some of your colibrid snakes. And this tooth can really only inject venom if it has the prey item all the way in the back of its mouth. It can't just do a quick strike and inject. It really has to hold on. A lot of these are more just grooved as opposed to actually hollow, like a needle. So they're really chewing the venom in. It's not a very efficient system as some of the more derived families have. So you see like that's attached back here. Next from that would be your proteroglyphus snake. So this would be, proto means early, so it's not the most evolved, but it's a step up as far as venom delivery goes from the epistoglyphus ones. And this bone has evolved to move forward in the mouth so that the fangs are more towards the front, which means it can strike its prey and deliver venom more effectively that way. And these snakes have totally hollow fangs, so they're really adapted for delivering venom, but they're fixed in place. This bone isn't moving. It's not really too kinetic. It's just going to stay there. So that limits the length of the fang. It still has to fit. Otherwise, it would look like a saber-toothed tiger or something. Those teeth would break off or become damaged in one way or another. So your proteroglyphus snakes would be your Elapidae family. So that's your boatbirds and coral snakes. We'll get to that when we talk about it. So then the most advanced would be your selenoglyphus snakes, and this would be your vipers. And they have this bone, this is the maxilla bone, which the fangs are attached to, and it's moved all the way to the front of the skull. And it's actually kinetic, so these fangs fold back into the mouth, which allows them to be much, much longer. And they open their mouth, they swing the fangs up, and because they have this motion, as opposed to biting onto the prey, they're opening their mouth really wide, swinging the fangs forward, and actually sort of stabbing the prey. So it's a very, very fast motion, long fangs are better for delivering venom deeper into the tissue of the prey. It's more effective at getting past hair and feathers and things like that.
There's like rattlesnakes and stuff.
Now I got a good picture. So it's believed that the ancestral state for snakes is to have some sort of venom. A lot of them do have. The venom glands are just the salivary glands that are evolved to produce specific chemicals. And in your other snakes, you know, maybe this has some weak venom, but it's just, you know, it's just saliva, so it's just chewing it in. It's not really incredibly effective, whereas maybe it's being delivered a little bit better with this. And these ones that really rely on venom have the highly derived structures for delivering it. So most of the snakes have these hyaluronidases, alamino oxidases, phospholipases, and phosphatases, but and they also all have proteinases, but vipers have especially high content of these proteinases. They're very strong, and they kill their prey by destroying its tissue. Whereas the elapid snakes, your cobras and coral snakes, have more of these basic polypeptides, and those attack the nervous system and kill their prey that way. And it's venom because it's injected, not poison, because that'd be something that's ingested. So now that we talked about some of the features that make snakes unique, I'm going to talk about a few of the major families of snakes. And these are just the more diverse families. So within the Skeletal, you've got, like I was saying, these thread snakes and blind snakes. They're all fossorial, so they're all living under the ground, and they're found pretty much worldwide except Antarctica. There are no reptiles in Antarctica. So the two main families within the Skeletal are the Leptotyphlopidae. There's about 117 species, and we call these the thread snakes. They're really small, only about 20 centimeters maximum. And then the other group is the Typhlopidae, and there are 369 of them, called them the blind snakes, and they're a little bit bigger. And like I said before, these guys don't have very advanced jaws. They can really not eat something much bigger. They really can't eat anything bigger than their head. They're very round in circumference. That round shape is really good for burrowing. They have really shiny, smooth scales, also good for burrowing, and the reduced ventral scutes. Yep. We actually have a blind snake native to Texas called the Texas blind snake, and I stepped on one this summer. So I haven't seen a live one yet, but it was about this big. It's like, oh, a worm. I haven't seen a worm here in a long time. Let's see. They're pretty cool. They tend to get shipped around the world and are like somewhat invasive because they're in potted plants in the soil sometimes. So then we have our Boidae. So we have 52 species of these guys. That includes obviously your boas, as the name would suggest. So these would be two boas, the rainbow boa and emerald tree boa. And then your anacondas, there's two species of that. The green anaconda, which is the really big one that you all think about when you hear the term anaconda, then there's also a yellow anaconda. anaconda, which is also a large snake, but not quite so big. Most of the boas are restricted to the New World. There are also 3 species of boas in Madagascar. There are what we call sand boas, which are within their own subfamily, which are fossorial and native to Africa and the Middle East. And really, you can find boas and all for members of the Boidae family in all sorts of habitats, from under the water to up in the trees. So you have your anacondas, which are highly aquatic, whereas you got some of these guys, which are really never leaving the trees. These guys under the ground. This guy's pretty cool. This is called a rubber boa. You can actually find these all the way up into Montana and Idaho, which a lot of people never think of any members of the Boidae even in North America. And there's, of course, a huge size range from 75 centimeters to almost 9 meters, which is a really huge snake. The anaconda is considered the most massive snake in the world, maybe like 400 pounds. So, really a top predator. And these all kill by constriction, which means they're coiling around their prey, and as the prey exhales, they tighten up so they can't inhale again. It also increases their blood pressure when they wait to die. And they give live birth. So then we have Pythonidae, and they're basically the old world equivalent to the boas. So they fill a lot of similar niches. They're constrictors. They're also very large in size, particularly Python gets upwards of 30 feet in length, which is a really amazingly long snake. So they're found in Africa, Asia, and Australia. They're terrestrial and arboreal, and they're oviparous. So that means they're laying eggs. And they're known for eating incredibly large meals. So this would be an African rock python. It looks like it's eating maybe a kudu or a nyala. It's an antelope. Is your reticulated python. This is the longest species of snake in the world.
What is that?
Reticulated python. I mean, I'm not going to test you guys
Right,
on the
yeah.
pictures, but.
That's one.
And like I was saying, they fill one of the same niches as boas do. So one of the really cool examples of convergent evolution I always like is, this is the green tree python. Notice it's green, lives in trees. It's got these cool heat-sensitive pits. Lives in the tropics. This is your emerald tree boa. Heat-sensitive pits, green coloration with the same white spots, same posturing and everything. They essentially have the exact same lifestyle, but on opposite ends of the earth, and they're not even closely related. I always think that's kind of neat. So then, Viperidae, which are probably my favorite snakes, got 305 species, all of which are venomous. And you have 2 subfamilies within there. You have the Viperidae, which are what we call the true vipers. And you find them in Asia, Africa, and Europe. And then the Reptilia, so these are your pit vipers. So they're the ones that have the heat-sensitive pit, which in a pit viper we call the warrial pit. And the Reptilia are considered the most advanced snakes. They have the heat-sensing pit, they have the selenoglyphus dentition, so the folding fangs. And vipers can be terrestrial, arboreal, or semi-aquatic. So can someone name a semi-aquatic viper? Who lives in Texas? Yeah, cottonmouth would be a good one. So, and they, like I was saying earlier, have a lot of proteinases in their venom, which means they kill by destroying tissue, and it looks really nasty. The joke is that you'll die whether you're bit by a viper or a cobra. You'll just have a lot prettier corpse if you're bit by a cobra, because you're gonna look really screwed up. So this is the gaboon viper. It's from Africa, and it's got the longest fangs of any snake. And you can see, so here's the maxilla bone, which is sort of thrust forward, and the fangs are actually held in this skin sheath to keep them protected. And you can actually have more than one at a time, because they sometimes break off and you need one to replace it, kind of like a shark. And the long fangs are really good for delivering venom. And this is my guy down here. This is a Massasauga rattlesnake. That's what I've been doing my thesis work on. So rattlesnakes are within the Viperidae. This is some Chinese green viper, I think it's called. And a lot of the vipers, or most of the vipers, are shorter and fatter proportionally, and they're ambush predators. Some of the tree vipers are more slender, but so they can move through the vegetation better, but are still ambush predators.
What did you say that
Oh, sorry. Ovoviviparous. So that means that they develop the young inside of an egg, but the egg never gets a shell, and the young break out of that casing and then come out of the mother alive.
So the eggs are inside?
Yeah. But they're not like full eggs.
So all of these traits apply to both Viperidae and Reptilia?
Correct.
And Reptilia were the ones we say were considered more advanced?
Yeah.
And what was it about them that was more advanced again?
They have the pit, the L'Oreal pit. So they are heat sensitive. And these guys are obviously across the whole world. And your rattlesnakes, your adders, and your other vipers, water moccasins, copperheads, that kind of stuff. So then we have your Elapidae, which is your other large group of venomous snakes. We have about 347 of these guys, and this includes your cobras, your kraits, your coral snakes, which maybe you guys are familiar with because they're in Texas, your mambas of Africa, your taipans and tiger snakes of Australia, and then you have your sea snakes. And they have a worldwide distribution. They're most diverse in Australia, so there are no vipers native to Australia. So these guys have really filled in their role. Generally, elapid snakes are longer and thinner and more active foragers. But in Australia, they also fill the role of the more short, squat ambush predators like the vipers do. And they, of course, live in a variety of places. They can be terrestrial, arboreal, fossorial, and marine. And they can get pretty big. It's going to be 18 centimeters with little dinky guys to 5.6 meters, which would be your king cobra, the largest venomous snake in the world. And they're protoglyphous, so they have the front fixed fangs. So this would be a green mamba. You can see its fangs are relatively small, but they're way in the front. And like I said before, their venom attacks the nervous system of prey. So all of your most venomous snakes in the world, the most deadly ones, are elapids. And they're just, I don't know, they're really cool.
What is it? Never heard that.
This would, a crate, This would be a, what do we call this, a blue-lipped crate.
Sea snakes?
There are sea snakes and then there are crates, and the sea snakes are a lot more adapted to living in the water than the crates are. The crates still have to come up on land to lay their eggs, whereas the sea snakes give live birth in the actual ocean. They're actually in their own family called the Pythonidae. So this would be a sea snake. You see it on land, it looks like it can't even move because it basically can't. It's pretty much dying up there. They have this really flat oar-like tail. They have basically no ventral scutes. Their nostrils are like on top of the nose. They have special glands for getting rid of salt in the nose.
It looks like there's something coming out of that snake.
Where?
Like where the yellow and the black and white are meeting.
That's just the pattern.
No, like right at the yellow, right, up, right there. It looks like something's coming out of that snake.
This like flattened part.
No, like.
Oh, it looks like the tail's coming out.
No, look, right here.
Does anyone else see it?
It looks like there's something coming out of the yellow right here. I'm saying it looks like. I know it's like. I know it's folded over. I'm just saying it looks like it's coming out of it.
So all sea snakes, the crates are their provenances.
I do not know that. They may not be. The crates may have moved into the water